As always, before starting any lesson, I always like to greet and salute everyone in the name of Ahaya Bahashem Yeshai Barak Atham, which is Ahaya, the Father, in the name of Christ, the Son. Bless you all, Barak Atham. Now today will be a continuation of some lessons that the brother and elder Gocc was going into concerning the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Now, for some of you may have received the information that was touched on last week, going into the tribe of Naphtali. Now, when we came on for the Sabbath, even though in certain areas people may have received the information for Naphtali, when we came on for the Sabbath, we went into some other information that we thought was very imperative for these last days, showing brothers and sisters the significance of what's taking place over in the United States when it comes to the storms and what's going on with the snow that's not melting and how the snow is enduring the fire, and showing how that actually connects with Bible prophecy. So for those who are tuning into the Sabbath lesson that we had, we didn't necessarily go into the information on Naphtali, but we did go into some prophetic information going into what's taking place in the United States. Others in different areas of the United States and brothers and sisters who are spread throughout the four corners of the earth, you may have went and got the information pertaining to Naphtali. Today, we're going to go into the information which is a continuation for those who received the 12 tribes information, touching on the tribe of Gad. All right? And when reading through this information that that was prepared, it was really informative. And I think that it's about time that we really delved into some of the history of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. I think for so long, the focus has been on Judah, the southern tribes. And we know, of course, according to biblical prophecy, it tells us that the Lord should save the tent of Judah first. So, of course, a lot of the information has been focusing on the prophecies and some of the things that pertain to Judah as far as history. But, of course, we know that there's 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And Gad is one of those tribes we're going to touch on today. All right? Now, it's not that we have ignored the other tribes. All right? Don't get me wrong. We have touched on some of the atrocities. And really, when you touch on some of the things that took place with the tribe of Judah, you're really dealing with all of the tribes, because we all dealt with some of the same curses, a lot of the same curses and atrocities. But once again, today's lesson is going to focus mainly on the tribe of Gad. All right? Now, before we go into this, I'm going to read something real quick, because a lot of people may be asking, why is it that we focus on the information pertaining to who the Israelites are? Or why do we take so much time trying to identify and give history pertaining to who the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel are? Why is it that we don't just focus on what they would call the love of Jesus or the love of Christ and some of the basic fundamental Christian doctrines? Well, before we go into that particular question, we're going to answer the first part, which is, why is it that we touch so much on the information pertaining to the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel? And to answer that question, we're going to go to the book of Isaiah, the 49th chapter, and we're also going to get the New Testament, going into the book of Matthew, the 10th chapter. Let's get the book of Isaiah chapter 49. And we're going to start at about verse 5. And this should be the answer to anyone who asks that question, who poses that question. Why is it that you focus so much on the information pertaining to the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Why is it that you don't just focus on the love of Christ, the love of Jesus, and all the other fundamental Christian philosophies and dogma that you can get on Sunday school? We're going to show you according to the Bible, both Old and New Testament. Let's go to the book of Isaiah chapter 49 verse 5. Go ahead.
And now, said the Most High, that formed me from the womb to be his servant.
So the Most High formed us from the womb to be his servant. To do what?
To bring Jacob again to him.
So the point of the Most High forming us in the womb to become his servant is to do what?
To bring Jacob again to him.
So the whole point is to bring Jacob again unto him. So this is our mission. If we're going to call ourselves teachers and disciples of Christ's gospel, we cannot ignore the people in whom the gospel was the main focus. And of course, the main focus of the gospel were the children of Israel. And we're not just going to give you our own words. We're going to prove that according to Christ's words. But that's after we read the book of Isaiah, the 49th chapter. Go ahead.
Though Israel be not gathered.
Though Israel be not gathered. Remember, Christ came to gather again, to bring again the tribes of the nation of Israel. The book of James tells us about an epistle being written to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. So we know that the nation of Israel was scattered. So though we be not gathered unto the Most High as one nation, go ahead.
Yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Most High.
Yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Most High. Go ahead.
And my God shall be my strength.
And the Most High should be our strength. So even though we scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, suffering under the hand of our oppressors, we still look upon the Most High as our strength. We still must recognize that the Most High is our strength. Go ahead.
Verse 6. And he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant.
And it says, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant. It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant. Like when it speaks about in Romans the 12th chapter, being a reasonable service. It's the least that you can do. Read on.
That thou shouldest be my servant.
That thou shouldest be my servant. So it is the least thing that you can do to be my servant. To do what?
To raise up the tribes of Jacob.
To raise up the tribes of Jacob. So this is why we focus so much on giving you the history of what took place with the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. How they've been oppressed, how they've been scattered. The doctrines that have been created in order to keep them suppressed in the society from the true knowledge of who they are. This is why we take so much focus, or take so much time to focus on these people. Because these are the people of the kingdom. And it is impossible to build a kingdom without first raising up the people of the kingdom. We say this many times. Okay? Go ahead.
And to restore the preserved of Israel.
And to restore the preserved of Israel. So this is the whole point of our ministry. To bring again the tribes of Jacob and to bring back and wake up the preserved of Israel. Remember, there's going to be a remnant that will be preserved through this last tribulation. Go ahead.
I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles.
And this is another point of focus when it comes to our ministry. Becoming a light unto the Gentiles, meaning the other nations. So while we're going throughout the four corners of the earth and waking up the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, we're also, in turn, becoming a light unto the Gentiles. Go ahead.
That thou mayest be my salvation.
That thou mayest be my salvation. Go ahead.
Unto the end of the earth.
Unto the ends of the earth. Now let's get the book of St. Matthew chapter 10 verse 5. To show you out of Christ's own mouth why we focus so much and take so much of our time to give you the knowledge and give you the history of who the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel are. Let's get the book of Matthew 10, 5 and 6. Go ahead.
Matthew 10 and 5. These 12 Yeshua sent forth.
So the Bible is telling us that these 12 Yeshua sent forth. Who are these 12? The 12 disciples. Go ahead.
And commanded them, saying.
And he commanded them, saying. So this is a commandment being given by Christ himself unto the 12 disciples. What was the commandment?
Go not into the way of the Gentiles.
Go not into the way of the Gentiles, the other nations. Now keep in mind, this was when Christ first came to bring his ministry. Okay? The first part of his ministry when he first came into the earth was to simply focus on a particular people. So he told his disciples, do not go into the way of the Gentiles. To the Jew first, then the Gentiles, it tells us in the book of Romans. Go ahead.
And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not.
And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not. Now, for those who have been in our past academies, and in even some of our past lessons, we have touched on the history of what took place in the land of Samaria in 721 BC. When you go to the book of 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, it tells you of how under the reign of the Assyrian king Shalmaneser, he took people from different parts of Assyria and placed them into the land of northern Israel. Okay? Took people from Assyria and placed them into Israel. Therefore, when Christ and his disciples came on the scene, there were no longer the true Israelites living in those areas of northern Israel. They were Gentiles, people from Babylon, men of Catha, Ava, and all these different nations that were placed in the land of Samaria. So Christ told them not to go into those areas. And now you may understand the reasoning behind why Christ dealt the way he dealt with the woman of Samaria, understanding that her forefathers were not of the original bloodline of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. He told her that ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for the salvation is of the Jews. Go ahead.
Verse 6. But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, why were these people lost? Let's get Jeremiah 17, verse 9. Now, these are precepts that you all may be familiar with, but they all apply when we go into the history of the nation of Israel. We can't touch on the history of these people as far as secular history without going into the biblical history. And the Bible describes to a T the historical facts that pertain to the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Okay? We're going to read Jeremiah 17 and 4. We're going to go back to Matthew the 10th chapter. Go ahead.
Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 4. And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thy heritage.
So the Bible tells us that thou, speaking about the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, even thyself shall discontinue from thine heritage. Now, I know a lot of those who deal with the Christian philosophy like to make you believe or have you believe that when it speaks about the children of Israel losing their heritage, is only talking about their land. When that's only one part of your heritage. Your heritage, by definition, is that which pertains to you or that which belongs to you. The question is, what belongs or pertains to the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel? Let's hold that and get the book of Romans, the 9th chapter and the 4th verse. Because oftentimes we go into this reference, and I've heard it many times. We'll go to Jeremiah 17 and 4, citing the fact that the children of Israel will be discontinued from their heritage. And people will flip that and say, well, that's just talking about the land of Israel. Well, we're going to see what the heritage of the children of Israel is according to the Bible. Keep in mind, the heritage is that which belongs to you or that which pertains to you by right. So what are the things that pertain to the nation of Israel? Romans 9 and 4.
Romans chapter 9, verse 4. Who are Israelites?
Who are Israelites? This is Paul speaking through the Spirit, having continual sorrow for his brethren, his kinsmen according to the flesh, who are what?
Who are Israelites?
Who are Israelites. Because he wished that he himself could be accursed from Christ. When you read up. Go ahead.
To whom pertaineth the adoption?
To whom pertaineth the adoption. So here is giving you the information or the understanding as to what pertains to the Israelites. So this is your heritage, what we're about to read. That which belongs to you or pertains to you. So what pertains what?
The adoption.
The adoption. Christ dying on the cross. That belongs to the nation of Israel. Go ahead.
And the glory.
And the glory. Go ahead.
And the covenant.
And the covenants. The covenants belong to the nation of Israel. That's your heritage. Go ahead.
And the giving of the law.
And the giving of the law. That's part of your heritage. And these are all things that we lost through captivity. We lost the knowledge of the fact that Christ came on the cross to die for us. We lost the knowledge of the glory of the Most High, which is the Most High when he would come down and deal with us in the old covenant. Back in the tabernacle, it states that the glory of the Lord used to come down and deal with the nation of Israel. That belonged to us. The Most High didn't appear and deal with the other nations like he dealt with us. That's what it means by the glory. We forgot about those things through captivity. Go ahead.
In the service of the Most High.
In the service of God. These are things that we forgot about through captivity. All right? This is our heritage. These are the things that belong unto us by right. It's not just talking about a landmass. Go ahead.
And the promises.
And the promises. The promises we forgot about through what? Through captivity. Now we're going to prove it going back to Jeremiah 17:4.
Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 4. And now, even thyself,
the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel, go ahead,
shall discontinue from thy heritage,
shall discontinue from your heritage,
that I gave thee.
That I gave thee. What did the Most High give us? He gave us the adoption, Christ down on the cross. He gave us the laws, statutes, and commandments. He gave us the covenants. He gave us the promises. He gave us the glory. Okay? And through captivity, we were discontinued from those things. But now we're waking up and we're gaining the knowledge of these things again. This is all part of Jacob being brought back to the Father. Go ahead.
And I will cause thee to serve thine enemies.
And he would cause us to serve our enemies. So the real Jews, the real Israelites would be serving their enemies. They would not be set up over the Federal Reserve. Okay? They would not be set up in the land of Israel claiming to be the Jews in the last days. Why?
In the land which thou knowest not.
You would be serving your enemies in the land which you know not. You would be discontinued from your heritage. You would have no knowledge that you are the people to whom the land of Israel belongs. You would not have the knowledge that you are the people of the covenants, that you are the people of the adoption. You're the people that Christ died for. You would lack the knowledge of the fact that you are the people of the promises. You're the people that the old and new covenant was revealed to. The old covenant through Moses and the new covenant through Christ. This is all of your history. But you lost these things through what? Through captivity. Go ahead.
For you have kindled a fire in my anger.
Because we kindled a fire in the Lord's anger. By what? By disregarding his laws, statutes, and commandments. So now let's go back to the book of Matthew 10:5 and 6. Go ahead.
Matthew chapter 10 verse 5. These 12 Yeshua sent forth, and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles.
So the Bible says, go not into the way of the Gentiles. Don't go to the other nations. Go ahead.
And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not.
And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not. Why? Because there were Gentiles in the land of Samaria playing the role of the Jews, or acting as if they were the Jews. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 6. But rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
But rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why were they lost? As we read in Jeremiah 17:4, they were discontinued from their heritage. Go ahead.
Verse 7. And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
And as ye go unto these people, preach, saying that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Why? Because it is the kingdom to whom these people belong. Or rather, the kingdom belongs to these people. And once again, you cannot establish the kingdom without first waking up and establishing the people of the kingdom. So this is why we take so much time to focus on the history and the knowledge of who the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel are. Because if you don't understand who the Israelites are, you'll have a hard time understanding biblical prophecy. You can only go but so far, but you'll get to certain points in prophecy and you'll trip up. Why? Because you're not relating the prophecies to the people of the prophecies. Okay? Let's get Revelations, the 12th chapter, before we go into it. Revelations 12 and 7.
Revelation chapter 12, verse 7. And there was a war in heaven.
So there was a war in the heavens. So we can see that a war was taking place in the spiritual realm. Who was fighting this war? Go ahead.
Michael and his angels.
You had Michael and his angels. Fighting against who?
Fought against the dragon. And that dragon fought against his angels.
Fought with his angels.
And prevailed not.
And prevailed not.
Neither was their place found any more in heaven.
So neither was their place found any more in heaven. So here we can see the spiritual war between Michael and his angels fighting against Satan and his angels. All right? Go ahead.
Verse 9.
And there was no more place found in the heavens. Go ahead.
Verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil.
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. Why does it call him the old serpent? Because this is the same exact serpent that existed in the beginning and was responsible for the cunning, deceptive trickery that would eventually cause the fall of mankind. So it says that old serpent called what?
Called the devil.
Called the devil. And what?
And Satan.
And Satan. Go ahead.
Which deceiveth the whole world.
Which deceiveth the whole world. So the whole world has been deceived by the cunningness, the craftiness, and the deceptiveness of Satan. The whole world have been deceived. Go ahead.
He was cast out into the earth.
He was cast out into the earth. What happened after he was cast out into the earth? Go ahead.
And his angels were cast out with him.
Go ahead.
And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our power and the power of his Christ.
So it says, now has come salvation and strength in the power of our God. So from the time that Satan was cast from the heavens, from the time that he lost his war, it was already pronounced that he's been defeated. Now it's time for the preparation of Christ's kingdom. So in the spiritual realm, Satan has already been crushed. He's already been defeated. Things are just now playing out in our time. And now, to hit you on a higher level, and hopefully we can go into this on another time, just strictly dealing with this topic, we understand that Satan is the power that was set over the Roman Empire. So if Satan was already cast out and lost the spiritual war in the heavens, what does that tell you about the Romans and their empire? It have already fallen. The judgment have already been pronounced. It's just now playing out in our time. And that's a whole nother lesson on a whole nother level. Okay? But go ahead.
For the accuser of our brethren is cast down.
For the accuser of our brethren is cast down. So Satan was known as an accuser of the brethren. So after that war took place in the heavens, he was cast down into the earth. Go ahead. So he can no longer go into the heavens and accuse us like he did Job, or like he did Joshua the high priest in the book of Zechariah, the 3rd chapter, where it states that Joshua stood before the Most High and Satan stood on his right hand trying to resist him. That can no longer take place. Why? Because the accuser of the brethren was cast down. No longer is Satan going before the Father to accuse us. We now have Christ as a mediator who is speaking for our cause, as it tells you in the book of Hebrews. Go ahead.
Which accuseth them before our God day and night.
And he accused us before the Most High day and night. Go ahead.
Verse 11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb.
And they overcame by the blood of the Lamb. All right, speaking about the brethren. Go ahead.
And by the word of their testimony.
And by the word of their testimony. Go ahead.
And they loved not their lives unto the death.
Go ahead.
Verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens.
So the Bible tells us that the heavens rejoiced from the time that the accuser of the brethren was cast down. They rejoiced. They celebrated. But what?
Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them.
And ye that dwell in them. Go ahead.
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth.
But woe unto the inhabitants of the earth. Why?
And of the sea.
And of the sea. Go ahead. Because they would also suffer under the reign of the wicked. Go ahead.
For the devil is come down unto you.
Because the devil is come down unto you. Doing what?
Having great wrath.
Having great wrath. Because what?
Because he knoweth that he had a short time.
Because he knew he only had a short time to rule. All right? He only had a short time to rule. And we know according to the Bible, Matthew the 24th chapter, it tells us that his time was cut short. So even the time that was initially destined for Satan to rule was eventually cut short. The Bible tells us that in 2 days we will be revived. Speaking about 2,000 years. And then in the third day he would revive us and we would live in his sight. As a matter of fact, let's get that so I don't misquote it. Hosea the 6th chapter. Go ahead.
Hosea chapter 6 verse 1. Come, let us return unto the Lord.
So the Bible is saying, come, let us return unto the Lord. Go ahead.
For he had torn.
For he had torn. Now the question is, who did the Lord tear in the Old Testament? Did he tear all nations? Did he tear the Gentiles? No. He tore the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Okay? So the call that's being made in Hosea the 6th chapter in the first verse is not to all people. The call is being made to the people who were torn in the Old Testament. Who's that? The 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Go ahead.
And he will heal us.
And he will heal us. Go ahead.
He has smitten.
He has smitten. Go ahead.
And he will bind us up.
And he will bind us up. He will put us back together as one. As it speaks about with the parable of the 2 sticks in Ezekiel the 37th chapter. Also in Ephesians the 2nd chapter, speaking about the middle wall of partition being broken down. Go ahead.
Verse 2. After 2 days will he revive us.
After 2 days, meaning 2,000 years, he would revive us. Remember, 2 Peter 3:8 states that, beloved, be not ignorant. For 2 days, or 1 day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. Okay? So when it says 2 days, it's not talking about 2 physical days, not talking about 2 24-hour periods, but 2,000 years. Go ahead.
Verse 2. After 2 days he will revive us.
After 2,000 years, we would be revived, and yes, we're being revived in these last days. What are we being revived from? Let's hold that and get the book of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. As a matter of fact, you can hold what you got. I'll read Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, to show you exactly what we're being revived from. This is Ezekiel 37. I'll start at verse 1. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and carried me out in the spirit of the Lord, and set me down in the midst of the valley which was full of bones, and caused me to pass by them round about. And behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. Verse 3. And he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? So when it speaks about these valley of dry bones, this is not talking about people who are physically dead. These are speaking about people who are spiritually dead. And now the Most High is asking Ezekiel the question, can these bones live? Can their spirits be revived? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we're reading about that revival in the book of Hosea the 6th chapter. Read that again.
Hosea chapter 6 verse 2. And after 2 days he will revive us.
He would revive us. He would wake up that valley of dry bones. Go ahead.
And the third day he will raise us up.
And the third day he would raise us up, like it speaks about in the book of Ezekiel, also the book of Revelations, the 11th chapter. We would be raised up as an exceeding great army. Go ahead.
And we shall live in his sight.
And we should live in his sight. Okay? So during that 2,000 years, this is the time that Satan had to rule. But of course, that time was cut short. All right? Let's go back to the book of Matthew, the 10th chapter. As a matter of fact, Revelations 12 is where we left off. All right? We're going back to Revelations, the 12th chapter.
All right, Revelations chapter 12, verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them.
So rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Go ahead.
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth,
But woe unto the inhabitants of the earth. Why?
and of the sea,
And of the sea, because he would also rain hell over the sea. The sea would also be subject unto the wicked reign of Lucifer. Go ahead.
for the devil is come down unto you,
Because the devil is come down unto you, knowing what?
having great wrath,
Having great wrath,
because he knoweth that he had a short time.
because he knew that he had a short time before Christ came back to revive the nation of Israel. He had a short time before you would wake up, and eventually Christ would come back and raise you to become a nation, to rule the kingdom of heaven. Go ahead.
Verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth,
So when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, no longer had entrance into the heaven to accuse you before the Father. Go ahead.
he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child,
He persecuted the woman, the nation of Israel, which brought forth the man-child, which is Christ. Salakia. Read that again.
and when the dragon saw that he was cast out into the earth,
Go ahead.
he persecuted the woman which brought forth the
He
man-child.
began to persecute the woman. The woman is the nation of Israel. The woman is not speaking about the church as they tell you through Christian dogma. It's strictly speaking about the nation of Israel. The Bible tells us that the Most High have called us as a delicate woman. Also, it tells us in Isaiah the 54th chapter that he have called us a woman forsaken. So the nation of Israel is this woman being spoken about in the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter. And the man-child that is speaking about is Christ. Go ahead.
Verse 14. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle,
So the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she may what?
that she may flee into the wilderness.
That she may flee into the wilderness. This is now our people fleeing into Africa. All right, go ahead.
And to her place,
Into her place
where she is nourished for a time and times and half of a time.
where she was nourished for a time and a half time. So the question is this: what did Satan and the nations do while the nation of Israel was fleeing from the face of the serpent and hiding from the face of the serpent for the time and a half time? Were they just sitting on their hands and folding their arms and twiddling their thumbs and waiting for us to resurface? No. They were creating the lies, the doctrines, and the philosophies that would be used to enslave us on the other side of our captivity. Okay? And it actually tells you this as you read on. Go ahead.
From the face of the serpent.
So we fled from the face of the serpent. Who was the serpent working with? The Roman Empire. All right? So we fled to get away. The Most High gave us 2 great wings of an eagle so that we can fly away from the serpent, giving us time to hide from his wrath and his destruction. Go ahead.
Verse 15. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood.
So the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood. He began creating religious philosophies, religious doctrines, and different ideologies that would be used to enslave the children of Israel on the other side of their captivity. All right? So it's not like they waited until they found us and then began to create the doctrines. They created the doctrines, sent them out into the earth, sent out their missionaries, and then went into different areas of the earth, found where we were, documented the history of who we were, documented the customs that they found amongst us, took it back to the serpent and said, listen, we have found the people whom you've been looking for. What do we do next? And after that, you start to see what we see through roots, through the Renaissance, through the destruction of the Native American Indians. Okay?
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood.
So he cast out of his mouth water as a flood. He started throwing out lies, philosophies, doctrines. Go ahead.
After the woman.
After the woman. So all of these different philosophies you see in the earth is not targeted to enslave and then capture the minds of all the other nations. Even though the Bible tells us that he deceived the whole world. Because in order to deceive us, he had to deceive everyone else. Okay? But there's one people in this earth who are the focal point of all of Satan's lies. And that's the people spoken of in Revelations, the 12th chapter. The people of this woman. Who is the woman? The nation of Israel. You are the target of all of Satan's lies. Go ahead.
That he might cause her to be carried away of the flood.
And he did it that he may cause her, the nation of Israel, to be carried away of all of these lies. Go ahead.
Verse 16. And the earth helped the woman.
And the earth helped the woman. As the Bible tells you, the world fights for the nation of Israel. The world fights for the nation of Israel. So the earth started now bringing forth artifacts, bringing forth archaeology. Records started resurfacing as they started going into different areas of the earth, performing archaeology. They started finding images of our people ruling in different areas of the earth. They started finding artifacts of our people in different areas of the earth. They started finding the records that our people were hiding in caverns of the earth, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees. All of these different things that were hidden for a time to come, so that in the last days, these records and these artifacts and all these things would be revealed unto the children of the righteous. Okay, as it tells you in the Book of Enoch, the Lord in the last days would reveal the books unto the righteous. Okay, go ahead.
And the earth opened her mouth.
And the earth opened her mouth. So by opening up and revealing the archaeology, the artifacts, the records, the history, go ahead.
And swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth.
It began to swallow up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So no longer could he lie concerning history, because now the earth started providing us with the records to swallow up all of Satan's lies. So no longer are the lies working. So now what does this have to do with the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel? You have to understand that this effort to hide our history, to create these lies, didn't just take place over a 2 or 3 year period. These lies were hundreds, even thousands of years in advance. Okay? Thousands of years in advance in order to eventually captivate and enslave the minds of our people. So it's going to take more than just a few things, a few lessons just to unravel all of these lies. We continually go back and forth and keep giving you the information on the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. What they used to enslave us. What they used to deceive us. Okay? So this is why we take so much time. Because so much time was put into hiding the information, we have to take a lot of time to unravel the information. Okay? So now, one more stepping stone, or one more piece of information you can add to your arsenal is what we will reveal today concerning the tribe of Gad. Now, even though it's not giving you everything, because we can be here for days on end just touching on information from tribe to tribe, it will give you some more history concerning this particular tribe of Israel. So let's go into the tribe of Gad, and we're going to start off in the book of Genesis, the 49th chapter. We're going to the book of Genesis 49, verse 18.
Genesis chapter 49, verse 18. I have waited for my salvation, O Most High.
Go ahead.
Gad, a troop shall overcome him.
The Bible tells you, Gad, a troop shall overcome him. The question is, what is the troop that overcame the tribe of Gad? Better yet, who is the tribe of Gad according to history? We're going to show you. All right. Now, a quick reference, a quick quote we're going to read from a website called The History of the Native Americans. The History of the Native Americans. It states, by the time of the first European voyages touched the shores, or by the time the first European voyages touched the shores of North America, there were roughly 50 million people already living there. So before the Europeans came in to the Americas, or to the shores of America, there were well over 50 million people already living on the continent. I'm going to read on. And what is now known as the United States, there were about 10 million Native Americans when Europeans began, quote unquote, exploring the territory, according to history.com. So the question is, what happened to cause a population of 50 million to drop over 40 million people and end up with 10 million? We're going to go into some of the history to find out. All right. Now you're going to find out that through history, the troop that overcame Gad was the U.S. Cavalry. All right. It was the U.S. Cavalry that came over to the Americas and began to destroy the children of the Native American Indians. And this is documented in history. And here we have a book called American Holocaust by David E. Stannard, which documents some of the atrocities that were committed by the U.S. Cavalry against the Native American Indians of North America. And at the top it states the conquest of the New World. The conquest of the New World. Now the question is, if this was a conquest of the New World, if this was a conquest of the New World, the question is, who were the people that they found in the New World? To show you, we're going to go to the book of 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter and the 39th verse. Because if there was a conquest of the New World, that must mean that there were people in the New World. The question is, who were the people that they found in the New World and conquered? 2nd Ezra 13 and 39.
2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude.
So the Bible tells you about how Christ gathered another peaceable multitude. Go ahead.
Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land.
So these were the 10 tribes that were carried away prisoners in their own land. All right. What was their land? The land of Samaria. Go ahead.
In the time of Hosea, the king.
In the time of Hosea the king. So this was the king that was reigning during the time. This is the king that was reigning in Israel during the time of their captivity. Go ahead.
Whom Salmanasseh, the king of Assyria, led away captive.
Whom Salmanasseh, this is the king of the Assyrians, who led away the 10 tribes captive. Go ahead.
And he carried them over the waters.
And he carried them over the waters. Go ahead.
And so came they into another land.
And so came they into another land. Go ahead.
But they took counsel. But they took this counsel amongst themselves.
But when they came into the other land, which was the Assyrian captivity, they took a counsel among themselves to do what?
That they would leave the multitude of the heathen.
That they would leave the multitude of the heathen. So they would leave the multitude of the nations of the Assyrians and do what?
And go forth into a further country.
And go forth into a further country. So their journey did not just stop in Assyria. They decided to take counsel among themselves to go into a further country. Now the Bible tells you about this further country. There was something about this country that was different than all the other countries that existed during this time. It's going to show you.
Where never mankind dwelt.
Where what?
Where never mankind dwelt.
Where never mankind dwelt. So on this particular continent, in this country, at this point in time, no man had set foot to live and began to conquer and what you would call colonize this particular part of the earth. This was a new world, a new continent, where never mankind dwelt. Go ahead.
Verse 42. That they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land.
That they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And it was because they broke the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High that they were taken into captivity in the first place. So they decided, we're going to go into another country in which we can keep our laws, statutes, and commandments. Where did they go? Into a country where never mankind dwelt. What do they call that today in modern history and modern geography, so on and so forth? They call it the New World. So when they came over to perform a conquest on the New World, who were the people that were in the New World? Well, dealing with North America you had the tribe of Gad. Okay? Go ahead.
Verse 42, that they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow patches of the river.
So now the Bible is actually giving you the directions in which they took in order to get into the new land. It's creating a map to show you exactly the routes they took to get to the Americas. Go ahead.
Verse 44, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and hell stilled the flood.
And it says he showed signs and hell stilled the flood. And in both Native American folklore or Native American legend, that's what they call it, but we know it's Native American history. Also in the other tribes of Israel, in their history, they have legends which tell you how they made it over into the Americas, how they were guided. Like with the tribe of Naphtali, it tells you how they were guided by a cloud over into their particular land of Hawaii. All right? And those different islands, those different Polynesian islands. You have history on the tribe of Gad, which tells you how signs were showed unto them in order to make it over into the Americas. Okay? Go ahead.
For the Most High then showed signs for them, and hell
And the Most High showed signs unto them, and hell stilled the floods. Go ahead.
till they were passed over.
Until they were passed over. Go ahead.
For through that country there was a great way to go.
And it took them a great way to get into this new continent, this new country. Go ahead.
Namely, of a year and a half.
Namely, a year and a half. So it took a year and a half of traveling to get to the new world. Go ahead.
And the same region is called Arsareth.
And the same region is called Arsareth. That's a conjunction of two Hebrew words, Aratazah and Achareth, which means, Aratazah means land, Achareth means another. All right, so Arsareth means another land or hidden land. All right, go ahead.
Verse 46, then dwelt they there until the latter time. And now when they shall...
And they dwelt in these areas of the earth. They dwelt on this new continent, in this new region where never mankind dwelt. Until what?
Until the latter time.
Until the latter times, to show you that they're still there until this day. Okay, they haven't gone anywhere. Go ahead.
And now, when they shall begin to come.
And when they shall begin to come in the last days, go ahead.
The highest shall stay the springs of the streams again.
The highest shall stay the springs of the streams again. But this time they're going to be brought back, according to prophecy, by the ships of Tarshish. And we're going to go into that in a later date. But this is showing you how not only the 10 tribes got into the Americas, it's also showing you that when you go into these history books and it speaks about conquest of the new world and history of the new world, we have biblical proof to show you who the people were in the new world. Okay? Who were these people? They were the 10 tribes of the nation of Israel who were taken away captive during the time of Shalmaneser and eventually made their way over into the western world and made their way over into the new world. Okay? Now it states here, I'm just going to read some of the history with the children that pertains to the children of Gad. Okay? It states, in the southwest, Apache leader Geronimo fought against Mexican and American forces and spent much of his life in turmoil. It was the Apache way to raid for what they needed, and constant raiding angered the Mexican government, which eventually put a bounty on Apache scalps, paying vigilantes to murder innocent Apaches. Even women and children became victims of the flawed policy. All right, this is another quote coming from that same source, History of the Native Americans. I want you to ask yourselves a very serious question. Do you know what happened at Wounded Knee in 1890? Speaking about the battle of, or the quote-unquote battle of Wounded Knee. But it's going to give you the true history of what happened at Wounded Knee at the hands of the U.S. cavalry in the year 1890. Do you know the real story? So of course that's letting you know. They ask you, do you know the real story? That's telling you that the official story, the story that's promoted throughout history, is a false depiction of what truly took place. Do you know that on December 29th, 1890, that members of the U.S. 7th Cavalry, over 500 enlisted men and officers to the U.S. 7th Cavalry, surrounded an encampment of Native American people of the, trying my best to pronounce this, Menakanjul Sioux of the Hunkpapa Sioux, and massacred every man. So basically it's telling you that they encamped around these particular tribes of Native American Indians and massacred every man, woman, and child of the Lakota people. You can see pictures here on this page of the dead Native Americans, speaking about this website, who were murdered that day, because that is actually what happened. What happened is that those Native American men, women, and children were murdered. So it was not a battle that took place at Wounded Knee. It was a massacre, a slaughter of men, women, and children. When you use the term battle, that infers the idea that there was gunfire and fighting, exchanging on both sides. But really what happened is that you had defenseless people, defenseless men, women, and children being massacred. This is the same exact tactic they use against you today. They say that there was a battle in a certain area when in reality they came through and slaughtered people. For example, back, I believe in the 60s or the 70s with the Black Panthers, when they killed, I believe this is when they killed Fred Hampton, one of the brothers who were active in the Black Panther Party during that time. They said when they came in to raid the house, there was a gunfight, a battle between the Black Panthers and the police, when in reality the only gunfire that was being shot, or the only gunfire that was found through evidence, was the gunfire that was fired through the police. There was no exchange of fire, there was no battle. It was a massacre upon our people. So just to give you a small example how through history they tell you one thing, but in reality the truth of what happened is a totally different story. All right? And this is what happened with the Native American Indians at Wounded Knee. Okay? It says the white man called it a battle, and did you know that the most medals of honor ever awarded in a single battle were awarded? So they got the most medal of honors for this massacre. Keep in mind, this was not a battle. This was not an exchange of fire or an exchange of fighting between two people. This was one people, the U.S. cavalry, massacring another people, all right, or committing a massacre against another people. And through this, they got the most medal of honors ever awarded. It says, now if you know anything about a medal of honor, that's one of the highest, if not the highest badge you can earn through military service. Okay? So it says, did you know that most medals of honor were ever awarded in a single battle were awarded? If you can believe it, there were 20 medals of honor awarded for the actions that day by members of the U.S. 7th Cavalry. So because they massacred the Native American Indians, 20 medals of honor were issued to the U.S. Cavalry to show you how they congratulated the death of the Native American Indian men, women, and children. They didn't mourn. They didn't look back on their actions and, reflect and think that, they may have done something wrong by killing these people. They were awarded. They celebrated. Okay, they were given medals of honor. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy 28 and 33. This is a curse according to the Bible of what would happen to the nation of Israel. Okay, go ahead.
Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up. And thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always.
And thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed alway. This is part of what took place not only with the Judite tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, but also the northern kingdom tribes, like the tribe of Gad. They were also oppressed and crushed alway. They were destroyed as a people. Okay? I'm going to read something real quick out of the book of Lamentations. If you can turn real quick to Lamentations, the 2nd chapter, and we're going to start at the 15th verse.
Lamentations chapter 2, verse 15.
This is right after the book of Jeremiah. Go ahead.
All that pass by clap their hands at thee. They hiss and wag their heads.
So the Bible tells us that all that pass by us, speaking about the nation of Israel, all the nations that pass by us clap their hand and wag their head. They shake their heads. Okay? This is part of what happened with the tribe of Gad. After they were finished destroying us, they congratulated themselves. They clapped their hands. How? By awarding themselves medals of honor. So it says, everyone that passeth by clap their head and clap their hand and shake their head. Shaking their head represents a form of shame. You know, when you shake your head and say, you know, oh my goodness, or you shake your head and you say an expression as a form of shame. That's what the nations do when they pass you, O nation of Israel. Go ahead.
They hiss and wag their head.
It says they hiss and wag their head, representing shame. Go ahead.
At the daughters of Zion.
At the daughters of Zion. Saying what?
Saying, is this the city that men call the perfection of beauty?
So is this the city that the men in earth, or the men of the earth at one point called the perfection of beauty? Was this once the desired city, the desired people? Look at them, they're destroyed. They're on drugs. Their women are prostitutes. Their men are drug dealers. They're murderers. They're pimps. They're thieves. They're jailbirds. Okay? This is what they say when they pass us and pass by. They're savages. This is what they said about the Native American Indians. Called them savages. All right? So they say, is this the people that the Lord chose over us? Is this the people that he chose to be his servant, his anointed people? Go ahead.
Is this the city that men call the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth?
So is this the people, is this the city that men have called the joy of the whole earth? Go ahead. You can't tell in the state we're in these last days. You can't tell that we were the chosen people, that we were the perfection of beauty and the joy of the whole earth. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 16. All thine enemies have opened their mouths against thee.
And all the enemies of the nation of Israel, all of the Most High's enemies have opened their mouths against us. How? Through theology, through their religions, through their history. They've opened their mouths against us. They've spoken against us. Go ahead.
Excuse me. They hiss and gnash their teeth.
They hiss and gnash their teeth. Go ahead.
They say, we have swallowed her up.
And they brag about how they have swallowed us up. They brag about how they have destroyed us as a people. Go ahead.
Certainly this is the day that we look for.
And they say, certainly this is the day that we look for. So they looked for the day that they killed and slaughtered the Native American Indians and eventually awarded themselves medals of honor. They were praying for that day. They were looking for that day. They were hoping for the day that they can get their hands on the children of Israel. And when they got that day, they congratulated and they awarded themselves. All right, go ahead.
We have found, we have seen it.
It says, we have found, we have seen it. So going back to the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter, when it states that the Most High gave us the great wings of an eagle to flee from the face of the serpent. What do you think the serpent was doing that whole time we were hiding? He was looking for us. He was sending his agents and his missionaries throughout the four corners of the earth trying to find these people. And once they found us, they came back and said, you know what? We have found it. We have seen it. Okay? We have found it. We have seen it. We have found the people you've been looking for. Now it's time to go and destroy. The 3.5 days is up, or the time and a half time is up. It's time for us to let loose on these people. Go ahead.
Verse 17. The Most High had done that which he had devised. He had fulfilled his word that he had commanded in the days of old.
And he had fulfilled his word which he commanded in the days of old. What was the word that the Lord commanded in the days of old? That's talking about the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, of what would happen to us if we broke the laws, statutes, and commandments. Part of that is allowing the nations to come and destroy us through conquest. Okay? So we understand that even though all of these things took place, it was destined to take place based on the sins of our forefathers. Okay? Now let's get back to the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to go to 33, verse 20.
28, verse 33.
33. We're going to go to chapter 33, verse 20.
All right, Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 20. And of Gad he said.
So this is once again prophecies of Gad. In the book of Genesis, the 49th chapter, the prophecies are coming from Jacob. In Deuteronomy 33, the prophecies are coming from Moses. So this is what Moses had to say about the tribe of Gad. Go ahead.
And of Gad he said, Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad.
Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. Go ahead.
He dwelleth as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head.
And it says he teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Go ahead.
Verse 21. He provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver he was seated. And he came with the head of the people. He executed justice of the Most High, and his judgments with Israel.
All right. Now we're just reading a few of the prophecies pertaining to Gad, but in a few, after we're done reading the prophecies, we're going to go back and give you actual historical quotes which fulfill these prophecies. Okay? So read on.
Verse 22.
All right, that's it on that?
Yeah, that's it.
Let's get 1 Chronicles 12 and 8. Once again, we're just reading a few prophecies and attributes of the tribe of Gad. Then we're going to actually go into historical references to prove that the Native American Indians are the fulfillment of these prophecies. You got it?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Verse 8. And of the Gadites, there separated themselves unto David, and to the whole, to the wilderness, men of might and men of war, fit for the battle.
So the Bible, one of the attributes of the tribe of Gad is that they were men of war. They were great warriors. Go ahead.
That could handle the shield and buckler.
And they could handle the shield and the buckler. Go ahead.
Whose faces were like the faces of lions.
Another attribute going into the physical attribute of facial features of the tribe of Gad. It tells you that their faces were like the faces of lions. So their faces, their physical attribute would be that, or their appearance, their visage would be that of a lion. Go ahead.
And were swift as the roes upon the mountains.
And it says they are swift as roes upon the mountains, giving you physical attributes of the tribe of Gad. Now we're going to go into a history book to now show you the fulfillment of some of these prophecies and attributes that are attributed to the tribe of Gad. We're going to go to a book. Some of you may be aware of this book, some of you may not. It's a book titled The History of the American Indians by James Adair. I implore all of you brothers and sisters to please go and find the PDF or go purchase yourself a hard copy of this record. Once again, it's called The History of the American Indians by James Adair. And basically, James Adair was a trader who dwelt amongst the Native American Indians for, I believe, about 30 to 40 years. He dwelt amongst the Native American Indians. And as he dwelt amongst the Native Americans, he found that their customs, how they dressed, how they basically lived from day to day, resembled the customs and the attributes that are found in the Bible pertaining to the lost tribes of Israel. So through his examination, he found that the tribe of Gad, or that the Native American Indians, were of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Okay? We're in the History of the American Indians by James Adair, page 5. All right? And I'm going to read this quote real quick. It states, The men are expert in the use of firearms. Now remember, it tells us in 1 Chronicles, the 1st chapter, or the 12th chapter, in the, what verse was that, 18?
Verse 8.
Verse 8, 1 Chronicles 12 and 8. I'm going to have them read it as I go along. All right? It tells you that the men are expert in the use of firearm. Now it tells us in the Bible, 1 Chronicles 12 and 8, that they were what? They were experts of war. Read that again.
And of the Gadites, they separated themselves unto David.
So they separated themselves unto David to serve King David. Go ahead.
And to the wilderness, men of might, and
Men of what?
Men of might,
Men of might.
and men of war.
And men of war. I'm going to read this again. The men are expert in the use of firearms, to show you that the men of Gad, not only in the Bible, but also in recent history or in secular history, were known for being experts in war. It says, in shooting the bow. Read on.
Fit for the battle.
Fit for the battle. Go ahead.
That can handle shield and buckler.
That can handle shield and buckler. Okay? So more attributes of the tribe of Gad being experts in war. It reads on and states, in shooting the bow, in throwing the feathered dart and tomahawk into the flying enemy, they resembled the lynx. Let me type that word into the chat. This is profound. It tells you in this record that they resemble the lynx. Now, if any of you are familiar with the animal called a lynx, this is an animal which resembles the appearance of a lion. Okay? Now, James Adair tells you that they resembled the lynx, but the Bible tells you that their appearance was like that of a lion. All right? And when you examine a lynx, they have some of the same features that a lion has in its face. Okay? As a matter of fact, let me pull up the image so you can see it with the water. Let me pull up the image of the lynx. Okay? So read that part again. They had the faces like lions.
Whose faces were like the faces of lions.
Whose faces were like the faces of lions. Now when James Adair did his analysis, he compared their faces to the appearance of a lynx. Okay? To show you that Gad has some very astounding, notable features, or outstanding, notable features that can be recognized. And they were both mentioned in the Bible as well as secular history. To show you that the Bible is spot on. Okay? Now it reads on to state, and their sharp, penetrating black eyes are exceedingly swift of foot, especially in a long chase. They will chase, or they will stretch away through the rough woods by the bare track for 200 or 300 miles in pursuit of a flying enemy with the continued speed and eagerness of a stanch. Read that last verse, the last part of that verse.
And were as swift as the roes upon the mountains.
And they are swift as the roes upon the mountains. Read that again.
And were as swift as the roes upon the mountains.
Showing you the physical ability of the tribe of Gad. They are swift as the roes on the mountain. Now I'm going to read this quote again. For 200 or 300 miles in pursuit of a flying enemy, with the continued speed and eagerness of a stanch pack of bloodhounds till they shed blood. So even James Adair, in his comparison, noticed that one of the physical attributes or the physical abilities of the tribe of Gad is that they were known for their speed. Like the Bible says, they what?
and were as swift as the roes upon the mountains.
They were like swift roes upon the mountains. Okay? They were like swift roes upon the mountains. And in secular history, it documents their swiftness, their speed, their agility, their ability to hunt down the enemy. Okay? So you cannot tell me that the Bible is not exact when it comes to identifying its children, its people. Okay? They're identified to a T, and we can go into secular history and find the same, almost the same exact reference. Okay? When they have all allayed this, their burning thirst, they return home at their leisure, unless they chance to be pursued, as sometime the case. Whence the traders say that an Indian is never in a hurry, but when the devil is at his heels. Okay? So that's what James Adair had to say about the Native American Indians. All right? Here's another reference to the tribe of Gad. All right? It says, romancing travelers and their credulous copyists report them to be in barbs and as persons impuberous, and they appear so to strangers. But both sexes pluck all the hair off their bodies. So Gad was known for taking and plucking the hair off of his body, with a kind of tweezers made formerly of clam shells, now of middle-sized wire in the shape of a gunworm, which being twisted and round a small stick, and from the ends they fasten therein, after being properly tempered, keeps its form. Holding this Indian razor between the forefinger and the thumb, they deplume themselves after the manner of the Jewish novitiate priest, or novitiate priest, and proselytes, as the former could not otherwise be purified for the function of this sacerdotal office, or the later be admitted to the benefit of religious communion. So basically what this is stating is that the tribe of Gad was known for depluming, or taking off and plucking the hairs off of their body. And you're going to find out that they got this practice also from the Bible. The Bible also mentions the practice in the Old Testament of priests who used to shave off their body as a form of cleanliness. Let's go to the book of Numbers, the 6th chapter and the 2nd verse. Let's see where Gad got this custom from. The book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 2. Go ahead.
Numbers chapter 6, verse 2. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when either a man or a woman shall separate themselves to vow a vow of a Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Most High, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink.
So now this is going into the vow of a Nazarite. Go ahead.
And shall drink no vinegar of wine, or vinegar of strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, nor eat moist grapes or dried. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. All the days of the vow of his separation there shall no razor come upon his head, until the days be fulfilled in the which he separate himself unto the Most High. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow.
Let's jump down to verse 18. Now there's other references in the Bible in which the priest would shave the hair off of their body. Okay, let me see if I can find that real quick. As you read, you can read Numbers 6 and 18.
Verse 18. And the Nazarite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall take the hair of the head of his separation and put it in the fire, which is under the sacrifice of the peace offerings.
All right, read that again.
Verse 18. And the Nazarite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation.
All right, now let's jump to the book of the book of Numbers 8 and 7. Let's start at verse 6. All right, Numbers chapter 8, verse 6, to show you that the Levites kept this similar practice of shaving the hair off of their bodies. Numbers 8 and 6.
Numbers chapter 8, verse 6. Take the Levites from among the children of Israel,
So take the Levites from among the children of Israel, the Levites being the so-called Haitian. Go ahead.
and cleanse them.
And cleanse them. How were the Levites cleansed? Go ahead.
And thus shalt thou do unto them,
So this is how you shall cleanse the Levites. Go ahead.
to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of purifying upon them,
So sprinkle the water of purification upon them, showing you that even in the Old Testament, water was used for purification, being a similitude or a resemblance of the baptism. Go ahead.
and let them shave all their flesh.
And let them do what?
And let them shave all their flesh.
And let them shave all their flesh. So the tribe of Gad got this custom once again from the Bible, from their brethren who were the Levites. Okay, go ahead.
And let them wash their clothes, and so make themselves clean.
And so make themselves clean. All right. Here's another quote coming from page 6 and 7 of A History of the American Indians by James Adair. It states, their women's dress consists only in a broad softened skin or several small skins sewed together, which they wrap and tie round their waist, reaching a little below their knees in cold weather. They wrap themselves in the softened skins of buffalo calves, with the wintry shagged wool inward, never forgetting to anoint and tie up their hair, except in their time of mourning. Now the question is, where does this, or rather I should state, this particular custom sounds familiar, in which women tie up their hair unless they are mourning. Well, if this sounds familiar, that's because the same exact custom was kept in the Bible by Israelite women. And an example of this can be found in the book of Esther. Let's get the book of Esther, chapter 14, verse 1. And this is in the Apocrypha. All right? And also we're going to get the book of Judith. All right? So we can first get Esther, chapter 14, verse 1 to show you how women would keep their hair tied up except during the time of mourning. Go ahead.
The book of Esther, chapter 14, verse 1. Queen Esther also, being in fear of death, resorted unto the Most High, and laid away her glorious apparel, and put on the garments of anguish and mourning. And instead of precious ointment, she covered her head with ashes.
And it says, instead of precious ointment, she covered her head with ashes. So because she was in mourning, she decided not to tie up and do up her hair. Okay? So it tells you that the Native American women never forgot to anoint their hair and tie up, or never forgetting to anoint or tie up their hair except in their time of mourning. So they would anoint their hair as well as tie it up. Like Christ tells you, anoint thy face even when you fast and in the morning. Okay? But in the Old Testament, our people would throw on ashes. They would refuse to anoint themselves as a sign to show that they were in mourning. But reading again this quote, it says, never forgetting to anoint and tie up their hair except in the time of mourning. So we can read in the Bible that when Esther was in mourning, she decided not to tie up and anoint her hair. She instead threw on ashes and did what?
She covered her head with ashes and dung.
With ashes and dung, go ahead.
And she humbled her body greatly.
And she humbled herself greatly, go ahead.
And all the places of her joy she filled with her torn hair.
And all the places of her joy she filled with her torn hair. So she started tearing her hair out of her head as a sign of mourning. All right? The Native American women kept this same exact custom. Now we're going to show you what took place amongst Hebrew Israelite women when they were not in mourning. Let's go to the book of Judith, chapter 10, we're going to start at verse 1.
Judith chapter 10, verse 1.
Go ahead.
Now after that she had ceased to cry unto the Most High.
So after she was done mourning, speaking about Judith, go ahead.
And had made an end of all these words, she rose where she had fallen down, and called her maid, and went down into the house, in which she abode in the Sabbath days, and in her feast days, and pulled off the sackcloth which she had on.
So she took off the sackcloth which she had on. Why did she have on the sackcloth? Because she was in mourning. Go ahead.
And put off the garments of her widowhood.
And she put off the garments of her widowhood. Go ahead.
and washed her body all over with water.
And she washed her body all over with water. She cleansed herself. Go ahead.
And anointed herself with precious ointment.
And she anointed herself with precious ointment. Remember, never forgetting to anoint and tie up their hair, except in their time of mourning. On the flip side, we've seen how Queen Esther did the exact opposite. She tore out her hair. She dismembered her hair, disfigured her hair, and then cast ashes and dung upon her head, and then put on the garments of mourning. All right? But we can see in contrast with the sister Judith, she did the exact opposite. She took off the garments of widowhood and mourning, anointed herself, and did what?
And braided the hair of her head.
And did what?
And braided the hair of her head.
And she braided the hair of her head. I'm going to read this quote again. Never forgetting to anoint, speaking about the Native American woman, never forgetting to anoint themselves, meaning to moisturize themselves, and tie up their hair. What does it mean to tie up your hair? That means to braid your hair. So yes, the Native American woman braided their hair in the New World the same way their foremother Esther did it in the past, or their foremother Judith did in the past. Salakia. Go ahead.
And put on a tire upon it.
And put a tire upon it, a head wrap. Go ahead.
And put on her garments of gladness.
And she put on her garments of gladness. Go ahead.
Wherewith she was clad during the life of Manasseh, her husband.
So here it is. Once again, we can see what the Native American women did, or better yet, what the Hebrew Israelite women did during the time of mourning and during the time of gladness. In the time of mourning, they would disfigure their hair. They would put on sackcloth. They would refuse to anoint themselves. And in the time of gladness, they would anoint themselves. They would put on nice clothing. And they would also tie or braid up their hair. Both of these customs can be found in the Bible, and as well as secular history. Okay, to show you once again, the Bible is exact in identifying the people of the book. All right, so we don't have to guess who the tribe of Gad are or who the Israelites are. All right, moving on to page 7, it states, the men wear for ornament and the conveniences of hunting thin deerskin boots, well smoked, that reach so high up their thighs as with their jackets to secure them from the brambles and bracky thickets. They sew them 5 inches from the edges, which are formed into tassels. We're going to get that out of the Bible. To which they fasten fawns' trotters and small pieces of tinkling metal. We're going to get that out of the Bible. Or wild turkey cockspurs, the bues used to fasten the like to the war pipes, with the additions of a piece of an enemy's scalp for a tuft of long hair hanging down from the middle of the stern. Each of them painted, and they still observe that old custom, only they chose bell buttons to give a greater sound. So the question is, where did Gad get the custom of tassels, as well as tinkling ornaments and bells on their garments? We're going to go into the Bible and show you exactly where they got it from, so that we don't have to speculate, we don't have to guess. And this is how you truly identify the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Okay? A lot of people like to attribute our breakdown to, something that came from man. Okay? When in reality, the history is there. The Bible was always there. The history is here. Okay? So all you have to do is go into the Bible and then go into the history to figure out who the people are, who fit these prophecies, who fit these attributes. Okay? And the Bible will speak for itself. So let's go to the book of Numbers 15 and 38.
Numbers chapter 15, verse 38. Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments.
Make them what?
Make them fringes in the borders of their garments.
Now I'm going to go back and read the quote we just read from History of the American Indians, page 7. They sew them about 5 inches from the edges, which are formed into tassels. What are tassels? Tassels are fringes. Okay? Where did Gad get the idea of wearing tassels or fringes? They got it from the Bible. And now we're going to pull up the Hebrew and give you the Hebrew for tassels. All right? The Hebrew word for tassels is H6734, which is tazayatazath. Tazayatazath, meaning a floral or wing-like projection. That is, a forelock of hair, a tassel, fringe, or lock. That's the Hebrew word for fringes. A tassel, a fringe, or a lock. So read that again, Numbers 15:38.
Number 1538. Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments.
So the Native American Indians, keeping the traditions of their forefathers, wore fringes in the borders of their garments. Go ahead.
Throughout their generations, and that they put on upon the fringes of the borders of a ribbon of blue.
Go ahead.
And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Most High.
So it was for a fringe that when we looked upon these fringes, we would remember all the commandments of the Lord our power. Now, there was another statement made about bells and tinkling ornaments being placed on the garments of the Native American Indians. Let's see where that can be found in biblical history. Let's get the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus chapter 28 verse 34.
Exodus chapter 28 verse 34. A golden bell and a pomegranate.
A what?
A golden bell and a pomegranate.
A what?
A golden bell and a pomegranate.
So the Bible says a golden bell and a pomegranate. Now I'm going to go back and read the quote that we just read. It states, they sew to them about 5 inches from the edges, which are formed into tassels, meaning fringes. We read that in the Bible. To which they fasten fawn trotters and small pieces of tinkling metal. What does that resemble? The bells and the pomegranates that were sewn onto the fringes of the priest in the Old Testament. I'm going to read on. It's not it. Okay? Or wild turkey and cockspurs. I'm going to jump down to the direct quote. It says, they still observe that old custom. What old custom? The custom we just read in Exodus, the 32nd chapter. What is this custom? Only they chose bell buttons. Now I need you to read that again.
Exodus chapter 28 verse 34. A golden bell and a pomegranate.
A golden bell and a pomegranate. So it states that only they chose bell buttons to give a greater sound. All right. So where did Gad get this from? He got it from the Bible. This is once again an old custom of the priests who would sew the bells and the pomegranates on their garments. Go ahead.
A golden bell and a pomegranate.
Go ahead.
Upon the hem of the robe about him, round about.
Upon the hem of the robe round about him. Go ahead.
Verse 35. And it shall be upon Aaron to minister.
And it shall be upon Aaron to minister. Now this was for a purpose. Go ahead.
And his sound shall be heard when he goeth unto the holy place before the Most High.
And his sound should be heard when he goeth into the holy place before the Lord. So a high priest, the children of Aaron, which were allowed to go into the holy place to offer the sacrifice, they would put bells and pomegranates at the hems of their garments that would make sounds. And as long as the people heard the sound, they would know that the priest was still alive. Okay? Now why was that important? Because if there was a priest who went into the altar or the holy place who was not right with the Most High, he would die on the spot. And then those bells would stop jingling. Okay? They would have to pull them out and send in another guy who was right before the Lord. And he had to make sure he had the bells and the pomegranates on the hem of his garment. Okay, so this was a purpose. Let's go to the book of Matthew, the 22nd or the 23rd chapter. As a matter of fact, we're gonna pass that one because it's going into the fact that we know that the children of Gad, when you see some of the fringes of Gad, they'll have fringes all the way down to the hip. All right, that's another custom that our people started following. When you read Matthew, the 23rd chapter, about the scribes and the Pharisees, who enlarged the borders of their garments. Okay, and that's what our people do today. We turn the fringes and the borders of blue into a fashion statement. Okay? You'll see people with fringes like the children of Gad. As a matter of fact, I think we have a picture. All right, it may have not transferred in this document, but we had a picture of the children of Gad and how they enlarged the garments. There we go. How they enlarged the borders of their garments. This can also be found in the Bible when Christ was condemning the scribes and the Pharisees. 1 second, let me get that back up. Here we have the children of Gad who have enlarged the borders of their garments. So there you can see all of these things can be found in the Bible, all right? Either for good, the bad, and the ugly, all right? Now I believe the last thing we're going to touch on is another custom amongst the Native American Indians, which was the cutting of hair, or the refusal to cut their hair. Okay, the hair of their heads. All right. Now here's a quote coming from www.sott.net. This article is titled "The Truth About Hair and Why Indians Would Keep Their Hair Long." A lot of you may look at pictures of the Native American Indians, or you may see videos of the Native Americans, and you may wonder why both the men and the women have extremely long hair. Well, according to this article, it gives the reasoning behind it. Okay, giving examples that were found during the time of the Vietnam War. It states, "This information about hair has been hidden from the public since the Vietnam War. Our culture leads people to believe that their hairstyle is a matter of personal preference, that hairstyle is a matter of fashion and or convenience, and how people wear their hair is simply a cosmetic issue." So they make you believe that hairstyle amongst different tribes and different people is simply because of, appearance or a cosmetic issue, something just to do with the trends, all right? But this was different amongst ancient cultures. It states that back in the Vietnam War, however, an entirely different picture emerged, one that had carefully been covered up and hidden from the public view. As I read the documents, I learn why and see that it seems during the Vietnam Special Forces in the War Department had sent undercover experts to comb American Indian reservations, looking for talented scouts. So during the Vietnam War, they would go amongst the Native American Indian reservations. After they had pushed the people on reservations, they would go amongst them and look for what they call talented scouts to fight in the Vietnam War. So they destroyed the people, conquered the people, took away their heritage, pushed them on reservations, which are nothing more than concentration camps, and then looked for them to fight in their war. It goes on to state, for tough young men trained to move stealthily through rough terrain, they were especially looking for men with outstanding, almost supernatural tracking abilities. So they knew amongst the children of Gad, one of their, as we read in the book of 1 Chronicles 12 and 8, how they had that ability to move swift like roes upon the mountains. They had the ability to track people with no problem. Okay, so the Americans during the Vietnam War understood that they had this ability. So they went amongst the children of Gad looking for men who they could use to track enemies, like we did in the past, like what was spoken about by James Adair in the history of the Native American Indians, how they would track enemies for 200 to 300 miles. Okay, it goes on to state, they could no longer access, it says, when questioned about their failure to perform as expected, the older recruits replied consistently that when they received their required military haircuts, meaning that when the Native American recruits went to get haircuts that were required by the military, when they received their military haircuts, they could no longer sense the enemy. This was directly from the Native American Indians, okay? They could no longer access a sixth sense. Once again, that's a quote. Their intuition no longer was reliable. They couldn't read subtle signs as well as access subtle extrasensory information. So the Testing Institute recruited more Indian trackers, let them keep their long hair, and tested them in multiple areas. Then they would pair two men who had received the same scores of tests. Time after time, the man with long hair kept making high scores. So they noticed that the Gadites who kept their hair, they noticed that they were better at tracking people, okay, or tracking enemies. It goes on to state that time after time, the man with the short hair failed the test in which he had previously scored high scores. Now the question is, where does this come from? Where does this ability sounds familiar to a story we read in the Bible about one who had long hair, and through this long hair he had strength and power. But you're going to find out that the Native American Indians are related to the same brother that we read about in the book of Judges, 16th chapter. Let's get that real quick. 16 and 16.
Judges chapter 16, verse 16. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death. So
you had Delilah, who was being used to get into the heart of Samson. And she pressed him sorely, daily, until it vexed his spirit. He was tired of her nagging and trying to figure out the source of his strength. Verse 17, go ahead.
That he told her all his heart.
So he told her all his heart. And did what?
And said unto her, that had not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto the Most High, from my mother's womb. So it says, a razor had not come upon my head, and I've been a Nazarite from my mother's womb. Go ahead. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me.
If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me. I'm going to read this quote again, this last few parts. It says, when questioned about the failure to perform, as expected, the older recruits replied consistently that when they received the required military haircuts, remember, read that again.
That there had not come a razor upon mine head.
A razor had not come upon Samson's head. So when a razor did not come upon the Native American Indian's head, they realized that they had extraordinary abilities. But once their heads were shaven, the Native Americans said what? They said they could no longer sense the enemy. They could no longer access a sixth sense. Their intuition no longer was reliable. They couldn't read subtle signs as well as subtle extrasensory information. So read that again. Verse 7.
Verse 17. That he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there had not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto the Most High.
So he says, I have been a Nazarite unto the Most High. So he took the vow of a Nazarite that we read in the book of Numbers, the 6th chapter. Go ahead.
From my mother's womb.
Go ahead.
If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me.
If I be shaving, then my strength will go from me. The same exact thing happened with the Native American Indians during the time of the Vietnam War. Go ahead.
And I shall become weak.
And he shall become weak. All right. Go ahead.
And be like any other man.
And be like any other man. Exactly what took place amongst the Native American Indians who were forced to shave their heads during their service in the Vietnam War. All right. So there was a significance amongst the children of Gad and amongst Israel when we connected to the Spirit of the Most High, and when we, did certain things. We kept the commandments, we kept our hair. There was a spiritual significance that came along with that, and what the Bible identifies as spiritual abilities that came with that, as we can see with Samson. And the Native American Indians used to operate with those abilities. Okay? Now, the last thing is going into is slavery amongst the Native American Indians. We're going to go through this real quick, and after that, we're going to close out and answer a few questions that you all may have. But let's get this last point, which I think is important because a lot of people are citing this information as far as slavery amongst the Native American Indians as quote-unquote proof of the Native American Indians not being Israelites. They say, well, because the Native Americans, had slaves, or they took black people as slaves, this is proof that they're not the true Jews, or they're not the true Israelites. Well, let's see if this is so according to history. Okay? Let's get the truth about slavery amongst the Native American Indians. Real quick, this is coming from Wikipedia, titled Slavery Among the Native Americans in the United States. So it states, slavery among the Native Americans in the United States includes slavery by Native Americans as well as slavery of Native Americans roughly with the present-day United States. Tribal territories and slave trade ranged over present-day borders. Some Native American tribes held war captives as slaves prior to and during the European colonization. So in other words, before the Europeans came over to the Americas, you had Native American Indians who would take captives of war as slaves, okay, or as servants. Some Native Americans were captured and sold by others into slavery to Europeans. So the same way amongst some of our people in West Africa, you had some who were selling our people into servitude to the Europeans. Same thing happened with the Native American Indians. Once the Europeans came over and started their conquest against the Native American Indians, you had our people who were selling their own people into captivity. All right? But some may ask, why is it that the Gadites had the custom of servitude amongst themselves, even before the Europeans came along? Well, if you go into the Bible and read the Bible concerning Hebrew customs, even in biblical times, the Hebrews kept servants. Okay? The Hebrews kept servants even during biblical times. It actually gives you the laws concerning servants in the Bible. I believe that's Exodus 21st chapter, when it goes into the law of servants. Even in the New Testament, it goes into how you had Israelites who were well off in the church who also had servants. So this was a custom that was always kept by the Hebrew nation. So what Gad was doing is nothing new. The problem is that when you hear the term slavery or slaves, you attribute it to what happened to us in the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? You think about roots, Kunta Kinte, slave ships, so on and so forth. When before there was European influence, we didn't deal with such forms of servitude as slavery amongst ourselves. Okay? It was servitude according to the commandments that are written of in the Bible. Okay? And it also speaks about the fact that they took war criminals, or they took prisoners of war and made them servants. That's also a Hebrew custom that can be found in the Bible. Let's get that in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 12. All right, and while you're getting that, it states that pre-contact forms of slavery were generally distinct from the form of chattel slavery developed by Europeans in North America during the colonial period. So the slavery that was kept by the Native American Indians and even by some of our people in Africa was different than that was kept by the Europeans during the colonial period, during the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? Our servitude was done. We carried servitude based on Hebrew laws and Hebrew customs. The European form of slavery was something totally different. Okay? It goes on to state that Native American groups often enslaved war captives, whom they primarily used for small-scale labor. Okay? So it says, it goes on to state that some, however, were used in ritual sacrifice. So eventually Gad started going off. Okay, and the tribes, the indigenous tribes of North, Central, and South America began to go off, similar to what you see in Apocalypto, when they started offering each other as slaves. So that did take place. But for the most part, as far as captivity and servitude, we kept servants according to Hebrew law, not according to the slavery that was done under the hand of the European powers. All right? So let's get that out of the book of Deuteronomy 20 and 12 to show you that even the Bible tells you about the custom of taking war captives as servants. Go ahead.
Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 12. And if it will make no peace with thee, but will make war against thee, then thou shalt besiege it.
So if a city decided that they would not make peace with the children of Israel, then we had the right to besiege it. Okay, go ahead.
And when the Most High thy power had delivered...
And this is us going into the land of Canaan, taking parts of our own land that really belonged to us in the first place, that the Canaanites decided to go into, as you read in the book of Jubilees. Okay? Go ahead.
Verse 13. And when the Most High thy power had delivered it into thine hands...
So when the Most High delivers these cities of Canaan into your hands, go ahead.
Thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword.
You shall smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword. Go ahead.
Verse 14. But the women and the little ones and the cattle.
But the women, the little ones, and the cattle, go ahead.
And all that is in the city.
And all that is in the city, go ahead.
Even all the spoil thereof.
All the spoil thereof. Spoil is what you get through warfare. Okay? Go ahead.
Thou shalt take unto thyself, and thou shalt eat the spoil of thine enemies.
And it says you shall take it unto yourself and shall eat the spoil of your enemies. Okay, so when we would go into the land of Canaan and take down the cities of Canaan, after besieging the city, if there were spoils left, we would take the spoils. Okay, if there were captives left, we would take the captives. We would take the cattle, so on and so forth. Okay, so that was actually a part of Hebrew law. So the Gadites were not doing anything foreign in the United States that their forefathers didn't do over in the old world, in the land of Israel. Okay? So that kills this philosophy that because there was servitude amongst the Native American Indians, that means that they were not the Hebrews. Okay? Total philosophy and falsehood. And of course, that concludes today's lesson concerning the tribe of Gad. We weren't able to go through all of the information we have prepared, as well as a lot of the information that's not even put in his reference, but it's enough to give you some of the historical background of how we identified the children of Israel, using both the Bible and secular history. So with that, I want to say bless you all and shalom, and we'll answer for a few minutes, we'll answer a few of your questions, okay?